what do you think I should charge? I try not to tell people a number. That's for me. So sometimes they know what the next number is for them, but sometimes they really pussyfoot about it. Giving your rate in hours suggests to the buyer that it's the time that matters. But if you're going to charge what you're worth, you have to be really strong on what your worth is. You know what makes you different from other people. And when I ask that question, very often I get a whole lot of fluff back. There's nothing specific enough, so they're not really strong on what the value to their clients are. And so that stops them really being strong about what they want to charge.
Welcome to today's episode of Influence by Design. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about attracting and signing clients. Now, that's very, very broad, but we're going to be very deep into charging what you're worth. We're going to talk about being comfortable to talk about money, being comfortable on sales calls, and all of the good things to make sure that you've got a profitable business. So welcome to the show, Alison. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. Great
Now,
to be here.
you talk about charging what you're worth and getting it. Now, this is something that I would say just about everyone that I've ever spoken to wants to do. I just wish I could charge what I was worth. And, I wish that I could get what I know that I'm worth. What is it that made you dive down that rabbit hole specifically in the work that you're doing?
Well, actually, I think it's because I've never felt that I've been paid what I was worth. When I was employed, before I started my business, I felt I was underpaid when I compared to what my husband got, and he's got the same qualifications as me. So I think I was bringing quite a load of frustration about that. And I just think it's so important that as women, we do get paid what we're worth. And I do work mostly with women, coaches, consultants, and trainers. I imagine your audience today is mixed, or is it women only?
No, we have lovely men listening and women listening to the show.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think a lot of everything I believe applies to them as well. But I do think women take a back seat as regards talking about money, getting paid what they're worth.
Absolutely. What's your background? You said that you and your husband had the same qualifications, but you weren't being paid the same. What were you doing that had you on such different paths, getting paid different amounts?
Well, we met actually on a teacher's course at the University of London. We had both chosen to teach English as a foreign language. And I'd been for 2 years in Brazil getting experience, and he'd been for 2 years in France. And we met on a teacher's qualification course, and then we went around the world together to teach English to foreigners. And then we got a master's in linguistics and this and that and the other. We were very well qualified. And I had children, and he didn't actually go through pregnancy and maternity leave. So I had a few gaps. But basically, I worked for most of the time the same as him, but that's what we were doing when we met. And when we came back to the UK, he got a job that was very well paid in a university, and I got a job that was not very well paid and not in a university.
Interesting. And I think there's a lot of women that can relate to that I think oftentimes, even as women, and this is a very general and blanket statement, but because we are able to hold down a job, run a household, look after children, not only do we have the qualifications, but we also have this experience that makes us able to do things in ways that men can't. Well, obviously we're different, but we have a very unique skill set that just can't be replicated. So the pay gap thing. Let's not go down that path. That's not what we're here to talk about today. Now, you work with coaches now, consultants, experts, trainers. What I see often is people that have been in their business for a few years. They're really, really good at what they do. They're good at the delivery. They're good at training. They're really good at their expertise, yet they just don't have the ability to sign the clients at the level that they would like, or the level that they would get if they were in a job. What do you generally say to people that come to you with that problem?
Well, generally speaking, they come to me not with the problem that I can't sign on clients, but that I'm undercharged. I know I'm undercharging. I should be charging more. They'll often come to me with that line. And then when I say, well, what's stopping you then? It's fear. I don't know what to charge. I don't know how much to go up. I'm afraid they'll leave me. I'm afraid I'll piss them off, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I find that I don't know what to charge really interesting because, and you might have a different take, but something I say to my clients is that number is just a made up number anyway. There's not a number that is like, oh, you're doing this. Well, this is how much you charge. And some people are really comfortable overcharging and don't have a problem. And a lot of people that I see are definitely overcharging and they don't know where to find that number. So for people that are listening now, how do they find their now number? As in, if they want to increase their prices, like how do they do that? Where do they go from here?
Well, some of them will say, what do you think I should charge? And I might say, well, you're charging X. And I know that's what a lot of coaches were charging in their first couple of years or something. And you've been coaching for 15 years or 20 years or something like that. So I try not to tell people a number because I don't think that's for me. But the other thing is, so sometimes they know what the next number is for them, but sometimes they really pussyfoot about it, and they just, they're charging, I don't know, maybe it's 6K. I'm talking UK pounds at the moment. Maybe they charge, well, very often they say I'm charging 500 an hour, or I'm charging 250 an hour. And I say, well, that's one thing to stop anyway, because giving your rate in hours suggests to the buyer that it's the time that matters. And so that's one of my pieces of advice. But to go back to your question, how do I answer the question, what should I charge? If you're going to charge what you're worth, you have to be really strong on what your worth is. Do you know what makes you different from other people? And when I ask that question, very often I get a whole lot of fluff back. I help people with their confidence. I help people with their leadership, and there's nothing specific enough. So they're not really strong on what the value to their clients is. And so that stops them really being strong about what they want to charge. But actually, the question I most often get asked is, what should I be charging? Or something like, well, the market rate is, I don't know, whatever. So I don't feel happy being different. And as you say, the market rate, well, who says the market rate? And the market rate for what? I had a friend who was really finding it very hard to get clients. And I said, well, maybe you need to put your prices up. And she just wouldn't look beyond the market rate, which she'd got from somewhere. And that really held her back. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, totally. What I find interesting in what you just said then is you were talking about charging what you're worth, and then you talked a little bit about value. So I just want to clear this up before we move on. Are you talking about charging what you're worth, as in your self-worth? Or are you talking about charging what you're worth by the value of your offer?
I think it's both. So that's a brilliant question, which I don't think I've ever been asked before. I do think it's both, because your self-worth, you've got to be strong in your self-worth in order to be a good leader in your business. And I'm talking mostly to women and men who are the sole person in their business, so a solopreneur very often. So that's one thing. But the worth of what you give to clients, or what clients get from working with you, I think that is super important that you're clear on that. And that you actually are unafraid to talk about results that clients get with you. And I find that that's something that the women I work with are, and I used to be the same, are very unused to doing. They talk in generalities like more confidence or more productive. And it makes everybody sound exactly the same. Every offer
Right.
is similar. And
Yeah.
so, and the pricing is similar because they've all kept it very low. Now, I need to say, I know your audience today is men as well as women. So the men who are very confident to put a premium price tag on, I don't work with people like that because they don't come to me. I look for female solopreneurs because I know that a lot of them have extra fears about being thought greedy or pushy or people won't like me. And I think this particularly stops women.
So you mentioned that there's the self-worth of how they feel, but also the value of their offer. I'm guessing that by getting clarity on their offer is going to give them more confidence. What I find is that a lot of people, what did you call it, pussyfooting around their pricing, often comes from the fact that they don't really understand themselves or can't articulate it clearly what their offer is. Do you find something similar?
Well, yes, I do. I tend to talk a lot about or help my clients with how they package what they give. So that's the offer, really. And one of the first pieces of advice, from my point of view, is don't charge by the hour. Charge by a package. You might call it a program or a bundle or whatever you want to call it. With my clients, I tend to talk about a program, and that enables you to stop this money for time equation. Also, I think a lot of us are quite embarrassed about what our price is per hour because it sounds extortionate in some cases. But when you think of what all your experience that is going into that and the results that they get, I think it's very important that we mention the results you can expect or results clients gain from this program is, I think that's super important. And to not just say more confidence, but confidence so that you can do this or that or the other, make decisions faster, or things that actually make a difference to your ideal clients.
How do you suggest people, or what do you suggest people think about by putting together an offer that does include value? You talked about then being really clear on the promise, but what about the actual meat and potato of the offer? Like, what is it that makes a good offer? And has an offer being what we would call like bad or not great?
Well, I can't really remember what I used to do, but I know that it's taken me a long time to make my offers really zingy. And with my clients, I think what makes it bad is if it's just the same as every other one that I've read. The title is important. If you've got a good title, I mean, executive coaching program, I would say goes in the bad pile, because that is just so boring. And I think you imagine a buyer. I mean, if you're selling into corporate, then they're going to be looking at various options. And if they look at all these executive coaching programs, there's nothing that sticks out. But somebody who might say, I don't know, executive accelerator or something like that, that's just off the top of my head, it's just going to stick out. And that reader is going to read a bit more carefully. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is to actually put results there, not just, well, obviously not features. I think most of your audience they've gone beyond giving features, like it's 3 weeks of this and 4 weeks of that. So we were all taught ages ago to put benefits, not features. But now I like to see the word results there, because it's what people are buying you for, to change something and get results. So to create it, and there needs to be a certain amount of courage to write an offer that's going to really attract. So to have the word results there, to have it high up in the offer, not just, on the second page. And I also think to say who it's for at the beginning. And this is something else which we need courage for, because a lot of coaches, trainers, and consultants, they want everybody. They don't want to close things off by saying, I work with this niche.
They're afraid that if they say this is the only person that they work with, they'll miss out on all of the other things and or all of the other people. And what's interesting about this is most coaches can actually work with a really broad range of people. But when we're talking to multiple people, no one kind of hears it. So it's really important to speak to that one niche. And I think that to understand that when you're speaking to that one person, not only does it stop the scroll for that person where they're like, oh, they're talking to me, you will still get those people on the peripheral anyway.
Yes, I think you're right. And I also think people will say if they like you and they think you're convincing and they trust you, they will say, you say you only work with women, Alison, but do you work with men as well? And so although I've made a big thing of working with female coaches, consultants, and trainers, men will come to me if they like who I seem to be. So I think that's the same.
Absolutely. Now, what sort of mistakes do you see coaches making when they're really trying to attract more clients? You mentioned that there was a friend of yours that wasn't attracting the clients that she wanted, and you suggested that she put her prices up. Why did you suggest that she put her prices up?
Well, she just seemed to be stuck. And this was a coffee shop chat, she was never going to be a client of mine, because I think coaching, and certainly a pricey coaching program, I wouldn't want to sell that to a good friend. So I just threw that out as one of the options. And I was so fascinated by her reply. I don't know, I have heard on various occasions other people who say putting your prices up is a first step to getting more clients. I don't think most of the people that I work with would naturally do that. They'd need to have a coach beside them or be in some kind of a group where they were all doing it, because of course I'm talking about women here again, because that's who I work with. But I don't think the kind of women who come to me who want to really make their business profitable and sustainable so that it lasts, and so that they're no longer kind of relying on their partner's income I think because she was stuck basically. And I wasn't convinced by the price that she said she was charging anyway. It just seemed an odd price to me and rather low. But I know that she was not confident, because she hadn't actually been long in the workplace. She'd had many years of being a wife and a mother. And so she was new in running her own business. And maybe her husband had said to her, this seems to be the market price, or that's the market price. And so she stuck with it as a kind of safety net or safety post. So that's why I suggested it to her. But I think for some people, well, if you sign up for my guide, I'll talk about my philosophy about pricing to gain clients, because I think that, well, we all know that a high price suggests better quality than average.
And that's what I thought you were alluding to when you said it, that there's a whole section of the marketplace that don't want the Kmart or the Target bag. They want the Chanel, they want the Gucci. The price alludes to more value. It alludes to a completely different segment of the marketplace. And there's a whole lot of people that just don't want the budget.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in the case of that friend of mine, it was very much a case of confidence not letting her go higher. So even if she wanted to be one of the ones that the first class passengers buy, she felt small. So I think if she had even opened her mind to changing her price, that might have opened something useful for her in her thinking. But yes, I think absolutely. My phrase to my clients is you don't see the first class cabin empty when you walk into the plane. There are always people who want to choose the highest level, and I would say put more than one price in your offer, so that there's the VIP level, there's the middle level, and there's the foundational or the basic or whatever you want to call it, the bronze.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the first class package, what comes first, getting the confidence or getting the offer right?
I think they're both very important. Well, I think probably if I had to choose a first, I think the first for me is know what your value is. Think of the clients who have done really well with you, and that's your caliber, really. And when you're strong on that, the next thing is your money, your feelings about money. You need to feel comfortable with money. To get that out of the way and break that barrier of thinking small money and greedy, pushy. Oh, I don't want to talk about money. Profits? What do you mean? I only care about my clients. That kind of thinking has to go in order to be able to get a powerful money mindset. And so I would say that those two things have to come very quickly together. And then I think with all this, it's changing your mindset about it. And we often start with the package fairly early because there's a client waiting or something. So, but then we'll do a bit on that, and then we'll come back to it again a few months later, because all these things take time to sink in. And also, you've got kind of tiers of how far you can go the first time round, and then you realize you could make it better. And so I think there's both of them are very important to keep repeating, keep going back to your value. I think when I work with people, first of all, it's about something fairly superficial on their offer. But then when we get further into our work together, we really are looking at what are the results that people get. How can you express it in a way that's going to make a potential client think, yes, that's something I really want. So it's specific results.
Yeah, totally. Now, what I find really interesting about what you said is that there's a lot of people that are just saying, I could never charge that, or I don't want to put my prices up. Yet, and I guess you and I work both with people who have a high degree of mastery in what they do. They're true experts in their field. They would never in a million years consider going and working for an employer on that wage or that salary that was low. Is that something that you find, that they know their worth in the marketplace as an employee, but they find it difficult to transfer that value over as a solopreneur?
Oh yes, I think that is definitely a case with some of my clients, that they were getting a fairly high salary when they decided to take early retirement, start out on their own. And then the first aim is to be earning that same salary by themselves. And then it's a matter of putting a ticket on my own value. But I think there's also the sales conversation. If you don't have really strong confidence in what you're offering and your price before you go into a sales conversation, it's terribly easy to say, oh, well, perhaps I could discount it on this occasion or something like that. That's certainly not, well, they might never do that if they were employed, when they were negotiating their salary.
So that fear, you mentioned it a little while ago, that fear or thought that they might be being greedy, or that fear that they're being pushy. Let's talk about the sales conversation. What are some of the symptoms that you see of people feeling like they could be being greedy or they could be being pushy?
I think the symptoms would be, I can't ask that. Those kind of thoughts. I could never ask that. People would never pay that. That's far too much. Those kind of self-thoughts that come in the way before you even write down a price. And I think there's also the difficulty of saying the price if it's a price that you haven't ever said to anybody before. You have to practice in advance. Otherwise, in the sales conversation, it's going to come out in kind of hesitant, garbled, or
in a high-pitched voice.
wrong way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That too, yes. Or stuttering or anything. So I think those are the kind of symptoms that I would say, because more the symptoms would be that you wouldn't dare to put the price on the paper, or when you might put it on the proposal, but in a conversation you might be, when they said we can never, if the client says, oh, that's beyond our budget, you would just move backwards. Whereas when you're courageous and you really know your value, you'd stand firm.
So how can people stand firm, even with those little thoughts in their head? Because I'm of the belief that we all have those thoughts every now and again, but there's some people that use those thoughts or have those thoughts hold them back. And there's some people that move forward even with those thoughts. How can, what is some of the tips that you can give people listening so that they can walk into or attend a sales conversation with confidence?
Well, I think one of the things that I suggest to people is that they have a conversation before they're going to ever have the conversation which mentions a price. They're going to have I'm going to say discovery conversation, but they're going to have a conversation where they discover what that person is looking for. And once they discover what that person is looking for, and they built some trust, and they know that that person has a challenge, whether it's for their team, if it's in a corporation, or whether it's for themselves, then the sales conversation, when you get to it, is much more confident, because you know that there's a real need. And I think as a service provider, you have to be ethical about this. If you know that you can meet that need, then you say, I'd love to have you as a client, and this is how it would work. But if you know you can't, I think you should say, that's not an area that I deal with, but I can recommend you somebody. I think we do have to be careful there, and not to say, yes, we'll do it, if we have no idea. So that's again where you need to have a strong sense of your worth inside, and what your expertise can help you to do. So I think that's part of it.
I love that so much, and it's something that I do. We have a short conversation with people, and if we feel like we can't help, we don't just turn off the lights on them. It's like, I'm going to introduce you to someone who I feel could be better, or here's some good free resources that you can go have a look, or go and check these people out. Because I agree with you. I think that there's a bad energy that goes into signing up a client that's not the right kind of client for you, and that you absolutely do need to know that you can help that person. And the marketplace is very discerning, and by being that type of service provider, that will hold you at a greater level, I guess.
Yes, and I think you can, as a solopreneur, you can become desperate. If you haven't had any new clients for a few weeks or a few months, you can be desperate, and that desperation seeps through. So when you say the market is very discerning, that is something that can be picked up. So that's one thing. But I think when we are desperate, even if we're not at such a stage of desperation that it seeps through, we might take on something that actually is outside our abilities. And then I think that's dangerous. So I think you have to be ethical and discerning yourself. So the discovery conversation is helpful. Now, you asked me a few minutes ago, what do some people do that's wrong and bad? And I think one of the things that I'm realizing is not helpful is to send out your proposal before you've had a really good, deep discovery conversation. And that's
I
what
love
some people
this
who
one.
come to me do. They send out the program or the proposal or whatever it is far too soon with a price on it. And I think that's dangerous, because some people will read, okay, this sounds interesting. The price is completely wrong. We're not going to pay that. I'm sure we can beat them down. And they'll come to the conversation anyway. But some will just read that price and think, price is wrong. Let's close it now. They won't even come back and talk to you. So I like to send out my first thoughts, which I call them, or a discussion document, without a prize, so that we get to the conversation and we can talk more about the meat of the offer or the program or whatever it is, without a price tag before mentioning the price.
As a service provider, by doing it that way, what does that give you?
Well, for me, it allows me to find out whether they're interested in what I'm suggesting. So it is a kind of discussion document that I send over. In fact, it may be what I'm absolutely sure will suit this person because I've spoken to them before. So, but it gives me the option to talk with them more about what the challenge is and what would be helpful. But it also allows them to say, for me to realize, does it actually work for them or not? So it allows me then to see their commitment, to see how excited they are about what I've suggested, but also it allows me to make some adjustments if there's something that really seems as if it's not going to suit, or I don't know, because they travel too much or whatever it is. It allows me some flexibility, and that's very helpful.
So what I'm really hearing is that you're tailoring your solution so that it meets your client or your potential client where they're at, and you're not just trying to shove some, of what you want to do. There has to be a meeting each other in the middle kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. It's got to be tailored, because particularly if you have decided that you are quite a premium coach or consultant, it's got to be tailored to what they need and want. And that's an interesting thing as well, isn't it? Because sometimes people say they want X, but as an expert in the field, you know that they actually need Y. So there's got to be that matching of what will be perfect for the result they want, rather than the route that they thought would get them there.
Yeah, I see this happening all the time because as coaches, we're wired to understand what the root cause is, but the client often doesn't understand that yet. And a lot of coaches will go straight to the root cause, and then the prospect's like, "Well, I don't need that. That's ridiculous." And it really is about knowing the symptoms that prospect is dealing with, so that we're able to speak to them about what they do know. But then we're able, when we bring them on as a client, to help them to really understand what that problem is. It's a conversation that we need to make sure that we open up so that they understand that we're on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why that discovery conversation is so important, so that you really get into I was going to say depth. If you have a discovery call that's 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it is, you're not going to get into everything, but you can get into enough to realize, well, what are you noticing? What would you rather notice instead? What are so that there are details there, and you can really get clear on the result that they're looking for, because that will allow you to meet their want as well as their need by talking about the results that they have talked about. Because as you say, if we start talking about symptoms or needs that they don't realize they have, that's not going to help at all. So we have to use their words and show we've listened, but also show that we're on the ball. We can help them meet those things that they said they cared about.
So we went from marketing, we've just been talking about sales. I want to go back to marketing again and bounce back, because I think that this conversation that we're having is really important to bring backwards. When we're talking about marketing, how do people attract the right people, or you mentioned be magnetic to the right people when they think they want something different to what we know is the problem? How do you blend those two?
I think, how do they know what they have to know their client niche really well, so that they can understand when the person talks to them what what they're talking about, and so that they can, in anything they write, whether it's a proposal or a newsletter or whatever it is, a blog, so that they can talk about things that are relevant to that special audience. And that, to go back to what we were talking about, having a niche or being a specialist rather than talking to everybody, even though we feel we could help everybody. It does, when you choose to be a specialist in some area, it does allow you to actually find out more about the people within that area. And then you can talk to them as if you really understand their position. So how to marry the magnetic with the what?
How to blend the symptom that the outcome that the prospect thinks they want, and from the coach's perspective, knowing what the core problem is. How to get that across in your marketing.
Well, I think that's tricky, to be honest. I think you can talk about examples, you can talk about case studies. I think the magnetism comes from the work you've done on what precisely it is that you do. What is your system, your signature system, how it works so well, what results you've got with other people. I think all of that is a blend that you take inside yourself, which creates a kind of confidence which is magnetic rather than arrogant. And I think that will come over in what you write, but certainly in what you speak, in how you speak.
Do you personally have a system that helps people to do that, to really talk about themselves in a way that is magnetic, or is that a bespoke way that you work with people?
Well, I think if it would be more bespoke if it was how you speak about it. Well, anything can be done bespoke and one-to-one, or it can be done group. But I think I try to do that with everybody I work with, whether they're in a group or whether they're in a one-to-one relationship with me. But I think this magnetism comes from knowing, from having explored what it is that you do and understanding its real value. And I think what comes last to the people I work with is really getting into touch with the results that really matter to their clients, and moving away from these fluffy terms, as I said at the beginning, like confidence and more productivity and lack of overwhelm and those kind of things. Being able to come down to the nitty-gritty of what results clients receive from working with you, I think that adds to all this magnetism. And also how to speak. Actually, funnily enough, that is something that I work quite a lot with, because the language is so important in how you sound convincing and different and really authentic. So because of my work years and years ago with English as a foreign language, it's made me a master's in linguistics. That's probably made me extremely sensitive to word choice. And I think that's very helpful. Clients say it's very helpful.
Can you give us an example of someone that came to you with a very unmagnetic way of explaining what they do, and what you did to help them and what came out the other side, what it transitioned into?
Well, I can think of some of one woman who pops into my mind, and she had a very low price for her coaching programs, and she was extremely experienced. She'd been coaching for 20 or 30 years. And so those were the symptoms in a way. She had a low price. She knew she wasn't charging what she was worth, and that aggravated her. And so she definitely wanted to change things. And she was in a group with me in one of my Charge What You're Worth and Get It group programs. She worked with me, I think, for about 2 years in that program, various iterations. And she wrote her proposals and her programs in a different way. I also helped her with how to express different things. And when she was having conversations, difficult conversations, selling conversations, I helped her with how she could put that across, what she might say. And she mentioned that she found that extremely useful and that she hadn't found that with any other coaches. So I know that that was something that helped her. Programs were far more interesting. And I think she was able to put her expertise across in a much better way. Of course, I was never there when she was speaking to her client, but I knew from the proposals, the programs that she was writing, that made a difference. I think I never saw how enthusiastic she could be, because she tended to speak in a rather plain and unmagnetic way in our group sessions. But she certainly raised her price. She doubled her price. And so when she left me, actually, she left me because she decided to retire. She'd got what she wanted.
That's awesome. Now, I know that you've got a free resource about a free guide. Can you just explain a little bit about what that is and who it's for?
Well, this guide was written for my clients, so female entrepreneurial professionals, coaches, consultants, and trainers. I think it's very relevant to men as well, so don't worry, you men that are in the audience here. It really explains my philosophy about pricing. And I've called the guide How to Gain Clients by Raising Your Prices. So it really does make it very clear that this whole idea of price tag equals quality. And so read it to get that thinking. And if it appeals to you and it makes sense to you, then I think you'll want to review your pricing and possibly raise it. So it's I was in a very lucid frame of mind. I think it's quite a good piece of work, and it's free. So really, that's what it's about. And I think it's quite convincing.
Yeah, love it. So you can get a copy of that by just scrolling below wherever you're listening. Click the link, get your How to Gain Clients guide, and definitely raising your prices is definitely something that's any entrepreneur feels good about. Alison, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. It's been great to chat with you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks very much for inviting me here.